Now look, I know that I did a video on Serral's Zerg versus Terran just a couple of days ago. However, that strategy, while it definitely is extremely strong and very potent, it is also not the easiest to execute. Now what I got for you today is another build that works very well in Zerg versus Terran, that is much more all-in, but is also much easier to execute if you want to just simply play some fun games on the ladder. And I have to be honest, I've been playing this build quite a bit myself over the last couple of days, and it's been winning like an absolute charm. Considering that the Cyclone now has a tech lab requirement to be produced by a Terran player, I think that this kind of build is only going to become more powerful, because a lot of Terran players just simply don't have the units necessary to deal with the amount of units that the Zerg can throw at them at that point in the game. So here we go. Let's go ahead and switch to the other side of the screen and let's have a look at this game from Serral's point of view. So this is a game that he played recently at Home Story Cup, the first main tournament in the new balance patch. And in this game, he goes up against Bunny. Now, Bunny is a top-level Terran player. A lot of people know that he's very good, but I actually consider him to be like a top 5 Terran player on the planet. The man is an absolute monster, and there's no denying that Serral has got a very strong opponent against him. Now, the second thing to point out, and I think the reason why Serral decides to go for this much more all-in focused build order is because of the map. So we're on Dreamcatcher Alley. This map in general has some of these high grounds right over here and these like crevices and like, I don't know what they would be called, but regardless, they are very annoying to deal with. If, for example, a Terran player manages to put their siege tanks right over here and start shelling away at the third base of the Zerg, and obviously the longer that this kind of game goes on, usually the harder it is for a Zerg player to deal with it as well. So usually you will see Zerg players go for these kind of strategies on the maps where they feel like they might be unfavored. Now, in comparison to the build order video that I uploaded just a couple of days ago, and in case you missed that one, I'll go ahead and post a link to it down below in the description of this one. This build, while you will still get a third hatchery, it is much more common to push much earlier on into the game with only about 2 bases fully saturated. So this one hits earlier, it doesn't hit with lair tech, it doesn't hit with any upgrades. It's one of the most straightforward strategies to play, and I think it's very good. So here we go. First thing to note is that he goes for a hatchery on the low ground, followed up by a extractor, and then also that spawning pool. Obviously, if you want to, you can decide to go for the spawning pool first, and then the hatchery, and then the gas, or maybe in this case, for example, Serral does decide to go for a much quicker third base. In the grand scheme of things, it doesn't really matter all too much, as long as you follow one basic rule. The point at which this build really starts going into effect is right when Serral realizes that his opponent is going for a very quick factory with a reactor on it as well. I feel like if you're going up against a Terran player who's going bio, so they go for like a double barracks initially, you're going to be in a much harder position to actually pull this off. So this Overlord Scout right now that is coming up is the first big tell that this push is a go. And the reason why I decided to specifically show you this game right here that he played against Bunny is because Serral doesn't really scout anything else other than just simply the factory, and then he decides to go for the strategy. So here we go. He does poke up on that high ground. He does see right now, alright, there's a reactor, there's a factory. This is about all the information that Serral gets in this game. Now, he did decide to go for the third hatchery right here before starting up Metabolic Boost. I don't think I necessarily would recommend that for most players on the ladder. To simply go hatch gas pool, start up your link speed, maybe pull 2 drones out of the gas, and then make 2 queens, go for a couple Zerglings, and then take the third, right? That's something that pretty much everyone plays right now in Zerg versus Terran, and something that I would highly recommend. So far, nothing weird whatsoever. Now, the point at which Serral decides to make the change in his strategy is right when he hits full saturation on minerals in the natural expansion. Now, by the way, Serral's not the only one that plays this kind of style. I've seen Raynor do it. I've seen a wide variety of Zerg players play this kind of strategy, usually on the maps where they don't feel as confident. But the point at which you want to make the switch is when you get the natural fully saturated. So if you look at the minerals in the main, you can notice right here, there's already 16 mining the minerals. There's 1 in the extractor right now. So shortly, right around the time that, in this case, Zergling speed is about halfway done. Normally, obviously, if you take the Zergling speed before the third base, you would probably put the drones back in right around the time that link speed finishes. But regardless, right when you saturate the gas once again, around, I would say like the 3.5 minute mark, you should also be reaching that full saturation right here in the natural. Alright, so here's the strat. So far, once again, I just want to give you a quick overview, right? Because this is kind of where the change in the strategy happens and where things really do get a little bit more complicated, but still pretty straightforward. At this point, Serral has really only seen this. It's not a whole lot. Now, obviously, he did already see the timing as well of the Reaper arriving on his side of the map. But other than that, it's all pretty straightforward. And you would almost say that Serral is kind of in the blind. In particular, for a player like Serral, who's very well known for his scouting and his map presence, this is pretty much as blind as he gets. Alright, so at this point, Serral makes the change. So once again, I want to emphasize, what he does is he gets 16 drones on minerals in the main, 3 in gas in the main as well, and then about 16 right here in the natural as well. Now, he's not quite at 16 yet. As you may have noticed, he's still got some drones that are just about to pop, but let's just say full saturation right here in the natural, or maybe like 37, 38-ish drones, right? So right now he's at 34, a couple are still finishing up. There's a few variations of it. The very specifics don't really matter. The last thing that you also do need is that third hatchery. The third hatchery is not just there to look pretty, but it also is there to generate larvae and to make sure that the Terran is sort of, you know, lured into this false sense of security. Serral does go up to 4 queens in this state, and right when he starts up that 4th queen, and right when he arrives at the 16 drones on minerals right here in the natural, after the one's finished, I suppose, he goes for 2 buildings. It's very easy. He goes for the Roach one, as well as the extractor. That's it. Now, he does make a couple more drones right here to finish up the saturation and also to show some workers over at the 3rd, but he does not really go, I think he halts in this game at like 38 or so, but he doesn't really go for any more workers than that. Okay, so 38 drones and then a couple Zerglings here just in case of a Hellion run by. Now, from here on out, all he really does is inject his bases, make a couple additional overlords, and sit back. So in total here, Serral has well, there's a couple more spawning right now, but he's got about, I would say like 13, 14-ish Zerglings. He's got 4 queens. He made a couple extra overlords, and he's got the Roach Warren done right now. Now notice, for the most part, while the Roach Warren was building, he just simply sat back and produced very little. Look at his minerals and gas right now. And that's kind of the key here. Once again, not a whole lot has been scouted. He did try and poke in a little bit, but this build is done regardless of what the opponent is doing, as long as there is a factory. Now, right at this point, right when this Overlord finishes, he's going to be able to start up anywhere between like 8 to 10 or so roaches. Once again, depending, there we go, depending on the amount of larvae available and the amount of, drones that you get away with in this kind of state. So, I think up to this point, right, the first 4.5 minutes are very easy to practice in a custom game. The push is going to be something that is going to take a little bit more practice. So in this case, Serral makes, I think, up to like 15 or so roaches here. Maybe 16, maybe makes a couple more. But while he starts pushing and while he's walking these roaches across is when he starts reinforcing this push with mostly just a bunch of Zerglings. Now, in this case, he did have to deal, obviously, with that Liberator. Notice he is not slowing down his push. I know a lot of people, in particular in like lower leagues, will get halted with their pushes whenever they are under pressure. It is critical to try and see this kind of thing happening. Right now, Bunny scans the natural. He realized that something is not quite right, and he's going to be able to start preparing for this push right now, desperately trying to get a couple bunkers up. But Serral is already reinforcing this with so much army as well. Not throwing away the Zerglings either, by the way, which is massive. But right when the wall starts falling and some of the units of the Terran start engaging is when he morphs in the Ravagers, and now obviously the Lynx can start flooding in. More and more reinforcements will move from the other side of the map as well, and Serral just easily walks over his opponent. Alright, so now I want to show you a game that I played myself very recently in the new patch against the Barcode Terran on one of the new maps. I've been doing this build quite a lot, and I have to say, it seems to be extremely strong, partly due to the fact that Terran players are opening up with a lot of Hellions right now. None are really going Cyclone very early, but also because of that 1-1-1 style. A lot of Terran players in the current version of the meta will go for 1 barracks, 1 factory, 1 starport, make a variety of units out of that. And in pretty much all scenarios, you're gonna be in a great spot if you go for this push, because Terran players pretty much always follow it up with late additional production or with an additional command center right around the 4-ish minute mark. And this build is not easy to scout for Terran either, because in pretty much all scenarios, Terrans will still have to go up against a Roach Warren or a Baneling Nest right around the 4-minute mark anyway. So you do start it up a little bit earlier in this case, but what I'm trying to say is that Terrans definitely do not have an easy time scouting this. Alright, so here's the game. I decided to go for the hatchery first in this case, and I do follow it up with a gas geyser here as well as a spawning pool shortly afterwards too. Now once again, it is critical not to lose in the early game. Obviously, if the Hellions manage to get in and they roast like a bunch of drones, you're gonna be in a world of trouble. So your queens do have to be in position. You do have to make that extra set of Zerglings just in case, because otherwise you may just simply be overwhelmed by the early game units that your opponent can throw at you. But the only time I've really gotten countered so far is when the Terran player opened up for quick siege tanks. Now, usually siege tanks aren't being utilized very much, at least on the higher end of the ladder. I mean, you will see it a lot more in like the early to mid game transition, and obviously in the mid to late game transition as well. You see a lot of siege tanks then. But when it comes to the early game factory units, it's pretty much always going to be Hellions or some Widow Mines. Obviously, if your opponent is opening up Banshee, you are going to be much more on a timer, because Banshees are not going to be that great when it comes to, or rather, you know, they're great when it comes to picking up the roaches. But even then, like in all of the games, and I'm not entirely sure if that's the case in this one as well, but in pretty much all of the cases where your opponent does go for Banshee Hellion, it just still works like an absolute charm. If they go for Hellion Liberator, it's pretty much game over. I'm just going to switch right here to my vision so you can sort of see what I was looking at myself. Now, please note, I do ideally want to see that it's going to be that factory-based opener from my opponent. In this particular case, I didn't see anything too crazy if I once again take control of the camera. I did, however, see that there is already that factory coming up. The reactor was already done, and while there are some additional Marines in this case, I think he actually lifts the CC, yeah. He's going to be able to get the kill right here on the Overlord, but it doesn't really matter all too much, because as you may have noticed from the game that we watched that Cyril played, he just simply does this build with very little scouting information as well. Alright, so here we go. Right around the time that you start up the third base, you also want to start up a third queen. And other than that, it's just a race straight to 16 drones in the natural. So as many drones as you can, you want to do spend them, if possible, on mining those minerals. So there we go. I'm making 7 more here. That will bring my grand total up to about 16 in the natural. I've already made like 1 or 2 extra overlords here as well, but this is the point at which I start up the Roach Warren and the gas. So that's it, right? That's the trigger point. First off, you scout that it's a factory with a reactor, and then secondly, you scout, secondly, you go for the Roach Warren as well as the extractor. That's about it. Very straightforward, nothing all too crazy. Now, if you suspect that your opponent might be going Banshees, usually a good time, or Liberator that is, usually a good time to put down your Spore Crawlers is gonna be at the 4.5 minute mark. Obviously, you do want to keep in mind that that does cost you a couple drones, so it is gonna delay the push just a little bit. But just keep in mind that that is what you're looking for. In this case, I also made a group of Zerglings just in case it was gonna be Hellions. Now, I know my opponent prioritized some extra Marines, so I don't think he's gonna be pushing, but I will be able to still get my roaches started right now. Now, the thing that I really like about this build, and the reason why I think it's really good, is because it lines up with a lot of the Terran's aggression as well. So if a Terran does a push, usually it's gonna be right around the 4.5 minute mark, right? So that's around the same time that the Liberator comes into your base or the Banshee starts harassing. Usually they also try and poke you with, for example, some of those Hellbats, and that's exactly what my opponent is doing here. So this is a bit of a different game than the one that Cyril played. Instead, we're having to fight a bunch of those Terran units. We're gonna have to try and shut them down. And right after shutting down that push, which once again lined up pretty much blindly, I just simply send my units across the map, and I'm gonna go straight for the counter. Now, obviously, if you manage to get your opponent's army like this, it makes the game even more straightforward. But in pretty much all the cases, I found that if they do plan on getting aggressive, you're in a great spot. Now, I do decide to reinforce right here with Zerglings, I think, just a little bit earlier than I probably wanted to. I also don't seem to have as much gas as I would like to. Yeah, so there we go. My opponent did get that Banshee out. I believe my queens did end up killing at the very least one of them. But already, my units are coming up. We're hitting away at his army. And if you look right now, if I take control of the camera, if you look right now at the amount of units that he has, there's very, very little. In this case, my opponent did decide to make an extra production facility before starting up the third command center, which is honestly kind of odd. Usually you start up the third command center even earlier, and obviously in that case he would be even in a worse position once again as well, right? So here we go. I'm just simply running up with as much army as I possibly can, and with that, my opponent will be forced out of the game as well. So honestly, this is a straightforward build that I do recommend very, very highly right now. I think it's great if you're looking to climb up the ladder. Now please keep in mind, if you want to do all-ins, please do so at like the very most every third game or so. I don't think you want to be cheesing every single match, just because over time you're gonna be left with a terrible matchup once the meta shifts and once players do manage to defeat this kind of style with ease. So please only execute it like maybe a third to maybe half of your games and play macro in the rest of them, just so you can still, you know, realize how to play a macro version of the Zerg versus Terran matchup. Regardless though, I hope you enjoyed watching this vid. If you did, make sure you hit that like button down below, and if you want to see more, make sure you hit that subscribe button so you get a notification as soon as I upload more. A special shout out to the Patreon supporters, you guys are awesome. But for now, I want to thank you for watching. Have an amazing day, do not forget to smile alright, and I will see you once again in the next one.